This is ChangeMakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
This week's ChangeMaker is Carla Godwin, the Executive Director of the PERIS Foundation, where she raises funds, support, and awareness for PERIS Hill, an affordable housing community that includes youth in extended foster care. Prior to joining PERIS, Carla worked in a nonprofit sector as founder and director of an organization committed to promoting gender equity and inclusion in faith spaces. Carla, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Katie. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am really glad to have you on today because you're such a unique inclusion to our podcast. But before we get into the work that you're doing, do you mind just sharing a little bit about your background and how you ended up at the PERIS Foundation?
Sure, absolutely. So I actually built my experience in philanthropy as the Director of Operations for the Graves Foundation, which we'll talk a little bit more about the Graves Foundation as we go. But in the nonprofit sector, I also built experience as a founder and director of an organization that worked toward gender equity in religious spaces. So I have experience on both sides of the philanthropy nonprofit world. And really, I consider myself kind of a collaborator and a process builder. That's my skill set. I think nothing really gets done without collaboration, and we need those systems and processes to get to a collaborative process. So that is kind of my background and how I got here.
You know, you mentioned gender equity and inclusion in faith spaces. It's not a phrase we hear a lot. What exactly did you do there?
Oh, sure. So I ran an organization that supported female clergy, female identifying clergy, and we networked them, brought them together for events. We actually had a podcast we did and just talked about what the idea of calling was for women in faith spaces and for non-majority genders. So
with all of the lockdowns, people have been watching a lot of Netflix, and it's been so curious because I have gotten into watching period pieces. And when you mentioned female clergy, it has not been that long ago that there were really extreme examples of exclusion and how female clergy or female of faith or female physicians were treated. Just give us some of your perspective to what the obstacles you were overcoming there.
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Katie. I actually, this work was deeply personal for me. I grew up in a pastor's family in a pretty traditional evangelical home, and we grew up in what's called a complementarian type of philosophy of gender, which is that there's male leadership and women are designed to be helpmeets to the male leaders. And so in my home, it wasn't possible for a woman to be a clergy person, and that is my giftedness. It's kind of the way that I am. I speak, I talk, I lead. And so it was a really tricky thing to grow up that way and then to realize late in life or midlife that, oh, you know what, this perhaps was my calling. And so what I started to do was just support other women who were doing that calling and to talk about how they'd been hindered by the ways they'd grown up and different things and help people move into that space when they hadn't been supported in that space before.
Well, that is so fascinating. I grew up with a single mother, and so the two-parent system didn't work in our family. And so we were forced into several different role changes as she had to be everything. And, you know, you do think about your upbringing, like how it influenced you for both good and for bad. But yet there's like this slice of, you know, did we go through this and now we're working and serving in our own, you know, lines of work. And so, well, I'm sure going through that may have had both the good and the bad, but now here you are, you know, advocating for others and advancing and opening doors, quite frankly, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, upbringing is good and bad. And I've always been raised to be watching out and to be thinking about others. And so I think that all of that has impacted the steps that I've taken. So I'm grateful for the upbringing I had. And, you know, everything has obstacles. So we're always working through those.
You know, speaking of that, I want to learn more about the need for affordable housing for people who are aging out of the foster care system.
Mm-hmm. Affordable housing, you know, is a complex issue. We're short on affordable housing throughout the country, particularly in Minneapolis. But really, for youth aging out of foster care, it's not just affordable housing that we need, but we need deeply affordable housing and supportive services. So figuring out how to incorporate all of those things and help youth actually on-ramp into a thriving adulthood is tricky. And so that's part of what PERIS Hill was designed to do.
So you're helping, you know, actually you're leading PERIS Hill, the importance of affordable housing for people aging out of the foster care system. I think, you know, if I want to start from scratch, you know, what currently happens when somebody leaves the foster care system? Maybe let's just start from there. How do they find housing? Like, just walk us through that process.
Can I start you with a story actually of our deep founder, the person who
Yeah.
originally got out of PERIS Hill? Okay, so Denise Graves, who was one of the founders of the Graves Foundation, who incubated PERIS, the PERIS Foundation, served for 25 years as a guardian ad litem, which is an advocate for foster children in the court system. And so she did that work for a long time. And while she did that, she witnessed too many young people age out of foster care and then not have access to affordable housing or the support they needed to get to the place where they could get into housing. And so she was just very troubled by this process. And often when youth exit foster care, it's not that there's nothing. There is extended foster care, and we work with extended foster care, and youth can enter into that program and have a stipend for housing and those types of things. But it can be really hard still to find housing that is affordable enough for that stipend. So what Denise felt as she was watching all of that is, you know what, we need affordable housing. We need something that youth can afford that is also wrapped around with services that can actually help them thrive and have the things that they need in order to navigate those first steps of adulthood that are very hard. But typically when that's created, it's created sort of in a silo over by itself and in a continued sort of systematized housing process. And as Denise and the Graves Foundation did the research over 6 years' time, they realized that really, if you can integrate youth into a larger community and give them a sense of belonging and the opportunity to create organic connections, that is a better opportunity for them to thrive into adulthood. So that's what PERIS Hill tried to do. It's an innovative model in that it's a mixed income tenant model. So there are 15 units for youth exiting foster care and then 30 units for affordable housing for general adults who income qualify.
So the Graves Foundation was really instrumental in the development of this PERIS model, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, precisely.
And so then how did Denise get involved early on to make this happen?
So she and her spouse, John, actually sold their business, which is called Convey Enterprises, and they founded the Graves Foundation. So the Graves Foundation is a family foundation. It's a spend down foundation. So we have an endowment. It has an endowment that it's trying to spend. It's trying to give all that money back into community. And so when they did that, part of their goal was to do this former foster youth housing initiative. So as soon as the Graves Foundation was founded, they started working on the research to get here to PERIS Hill. And so that was 6 years ago. PERIS Hill opened in November. We're super excited about that.
So PERIS Hill is a location. Is there any significance about where it is, or how did you guys pick that location?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is located in Lowry Hill, which is a desirable and historic neighborhood in Minneapolis. It's located near transit. We worked hard to find a spot where youth would have access to good food, good jobs, good transit. And so all of that is available. It's very near uptown and downtown, all of those things. The building was designed with youth input from the beginning. So even the location, there was a youth advisory council from the beginning that gave input on what the programming should be, where the building should be, what the design and branding should be, and all of those pieces. So the location was chosen in part by that Youth Advisory Council and by the Graves family. And so that's been significant to build affordable housing in Lowry Hill. It's the first intentionally built affordable housing in Lowry Hill.
Oh, well, that's very impressive. And even the inclusion of the Youth Advisory Council, how creative is that? And, I'm sure that everybody was proud for the ribbon cutting. What have you seen since the construction and the move-in? Now, are you having conversations to replicate this model in other parts of Minneapolis or even outside of Minneapolis?
Yeah, we're really interested in seeing how this model is going to work, right? It's a new model. There aren't a lot of people doing it this way. So from the beginning, we're running an evaluation. We're working with a group that does evaluation to, from start, have a youth survey in place, have both quantitative and qualitative data to track how it's going for youth, and to really gather the right information and make sure that this should be replicated, first of all, that it's working, and then to continually improve on what we're doing until it is working. And then we'd love to see it replicated. We'd love to see this happen in other cities. We'd love to see PERIS Hill put some positive pressure in the former foster youth ecosystem to say, you know what, design matters. Having amenities like a washer and dryer in your unit matters for youth. Having the possibility for young parents to live in the space matters. Those kinds of pieces actually do matter. And so we're paying attention to all of that in doing our evaluation and figuring out how to communicate why this stuff is important.
So I want to talk about the partnerships, and I want to talk about the details of how you finance this, because I want to give some insight for, our listeners who may want to leap after they hear what you guys have designed. But before we go into those details, just give us an idea about some of the wins in the lives of the people who are living at PERIS Hill, because I think this is such a crucial component. Not only have you provided housing and there's, a stabilization piece, but I want to hear about, maybe some specific success in the lives of the youth. Can you share some of those?
Yeah, I can. To a certain degree, we try really hard to protect our youth's privacy.
Yes.
I think that one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we do house, like I said, parenting and pregnant youth. And within the first week of being open, we had two pregnant youth who were going to lose their housing, and we were able to take them in immediately. The other thing that I'm really proud of about PERIS Hill is that we don't actually require youth to go through coordinated entry to gain the benefit of access to PERIS Hill. Some former foster youth housing or youth services housing actually requires a youth to become homeless before they're eligible for the benefit.
Okay.
And that's an unnecessary trauma to youth who have already experienced significant trauma. So I'm very proud that PERIS Hill does not require that, and that we're able to take youth immediately who are at risk of homelessness.
So you mentioned earlier that you guys have supportive services. So what do the local partnerships look like for you as you're providing this affordable housing?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about our partners. That's as I was talking about collaboration, part of what I love about my job is that that's what I do. I get to work with our partners and what they do, and I get to work with our board and what they do. We're a working board. So our partners on site, the Link is our on-site service provider, and they are a local youth housing services provider that they're incredible. They do everything. They work with youth who have been trafficked. They work with homeless youth in crisis, and PERIS Hill is another of their projects that they've taken on. So they are on site 24/7. There's a beautifully designed space on the first floor of the building that is the service space that only the youth and the Link can access. There's a kitchen there. There's a community space. There's a large TV. Monday is movie night, so they come down for movies on Monday. And that's where the offices are then for the case manager and the program manager as well. So we're super proud of that. And the Link is just an incredible organization that has helped youth in all kinds of spaces. And so we're really grateful to have them. They're youth-centered, youth-led. So yeah, we're excited about them. Our property manager is Volunteers of America. So they're helping us, of course, take care of the building, take care of tenants, take care of lease up, all of those pieces. So we're proud to work with them as well.
I like how you mentioned some of those design features, which would be great in any, apartment community, especially in affordable housing. But, it sounds like that Youth Advisory Council really helped, put in some design features that are applicable to their current lives. And it's great when you can see that incorporated. What is some of the things that everybody says is a win about how you guys designed this property? What do you hear on feedback from your design components?
Yeah, we've designed several accessible units, so we have people who are very excited about that possibility. But I think that, the thing we hear most often is just how beautiful the space is. It's truly a beautifully designed space. It's modern, it's bright, there are big windows all the way through the building. There are really gorgeous community spaces with, furnishings from Blue Dot and spaces that you don't, when you think of affordable housing, sometimes you don't think about high design, right? And this building is designed so that people feel at home and so that they feel a sense of community. And so I'm really grateful and proud of that. Every unit has huge windows. Every unit has a washer and dryer. We have a bike lounge and a bike repair station for youth because we're very near biking access, and Minneapolis is a great biking city. So those are some of the things we hear a lot. Just, oh my word, this place is beautiful. And then we were very intentional about the artwork as well that we chose for the spaces. Juxtaposition Arts is an arts organization in North Minneapolis, and they work with youth. And so all of our artwork in the spaces, or several pieces, are from Juxtaposition. And we worked with local photographers for pieces and just worked hard to make the space feel like home for these young people.
I love this. You are really speaking my language when you're talking about the combination of design, affordability, and transit. You're hitting all the buttons and creating a space of intention and inspiration really from scratch. So let's hang on here for a minute, Carla, because we need to stop. But coming up in the second part of my conversation with Carla Godwin, the executive director of the PERIS Foundation, Carla shares how they are working with youths leaving the foster care system and living at PERIS Hill.
We've got good relationships with different youth services organizations throughout Minneapolis to make sure that we are finding the youth who need this space and who can use it.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.